All right, we're now going to learn how to create a curve. And when we make curved lines in Illustrator, we create or set anchor points, and from them we drag out directional handles to define the curve that we're going to make next. So this is a smooth point. This gives us the absolute greatest control and flexibility. However, mastering this does take some time, so don't be impatient here. Let's go to artboard number 3. And we're just going to actually work somewhere in a blank zone here at the top. We're not going to start tracing right away. So in Artboard 3, switch to your pen tool. Make sure that we have no fill and a 1-point black stroke. And we're just going to practice by clicking once to start our line. So there's our first line. As we move over, if we were to click directly, we would make a straight line. We've seen that in our last 2 projects. However, if we click and hold down our mouse, we're actually going to set a smooth corner point. So what I'm clicking and dragging out is the directional handles that indicate how steep or how shallow our curve is and how much bend there is to it. This is not actually part of my line. This is just telling this anchor point, this smooth anchor point, how to behave. So when you drag out a little bit, let go. Doesn't matter where it is. But notice that you have indeed, instead of a straight line from point 1 to 2, we have a curve based on these directional handles here. Also look, it assumes I want to keep going. So if I did want to keep going this way, if I clicked once, it would set a hard point. So you never want to do that. If your goal is to make it curved and rounded, you don't just click. You click and drag out directional handles first. And then you click and drag out directional handles. And then you come back and you fill it in. So don't worry about what shape you're making, if it was meant to be a perfect circle. Just go ahead, click to make your first point. We're actually going to make that a corner point right now, but then as you go forward, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and see how you're getting it to bend. When you're done drawing, if you don't want to return to the start point and close it, same as last time. You can either hit Escape on your keyboard or you can hold down the Command or Control key on a PC and click away. So there are 2 points or 2 shapes that we just made with the pen tool. And obviously they're not good looking. We're just practicing right now. But the beauty of this is that everywhere that we have an anchor point, we can go back with our direct selection tool and tweak it to make it perfect, which we'll learn as we move on. So let's start with this first practice up here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So they were nice enough to give us directional handles, but in this last version that we just did, I asked you to click to start, meaning that was a corner point. I don't want you to click to start. I want us to establish this number 1 as a smooth point right away. So we can't just click, we have to click, hold down our mouse, and drag. So we're setting that directional handle immediately. It shows us where to drag to, this red dot. However, I just want to give you a rule of thumb. Notice that the curve that we're trying to make, this gray curve right here, is about this tall. Kind of a rule of thumb is to set your directional line just a smidge taller than what you're going to do for your next, for that curve coming out of it. Also, if you want to ensure that this is a straight line, because a crooked directional handle will affect also, you can hold down Shift. So click and drag up to the red point and then let go. That set our first point as being a smooth point right off the bat. And now we're seeing the rubber banding and how it's going to behave. I can tell you that this rubber banding feature didn't exist maybe 4 years ago, and you had no idea what it was going to do until you clicked and dragged on another anchor point, which was sometimes, especially when you're new to this, it was really difficult. So we're going to come over to point 2. Don't click. If you click, it's a corner point. We're not going to click. We're going to click, hold down our mouse, and drag to set the directional handles of this point as well. So drag down to the red spot and let go. Now we're truly done, so we can Command or Control click away or hit Escape. So quite often you're going to start with a curve point right away. You don't want to do that single corner point here like I did showing you these two demos. You can see how awkward it is over here where the two rejoined. So to set a curve, the first thing you do is click and drag out the directional handles. All right. Let's go down to the bottom of this and let's practice these. They don't have the little dots above showing you where to go. So again, we're not going to click. We're going to click and drag to set our first directional handle. I'm going to hold shift to keep mine straight, and I'm going to go just a little bit taller than the curve I want. By the way, because I clicked and dragged up, that tells it that our first curve is going to go up. If you were to click and drag down, that would have your first curve going in the lower way. So click and drag up a little bit higher than this gray zone, and then come over to the red point and click and drag down until you get it to match. And by holding, I have the shift key on, so this is a perfectly straight line. And notice I can't quite get it to match that exactly. So if I let go of shift, I can start to tip my directional handle a little bit and get it to better follow this gray tracing option that it gave us. I'm going to escape to get out of that, and I want to remind you that the selection tool selects the whole thing, but the direct selection tool, if we pick this anchor point, it's going to give us not only the anchor point, but the directional handles as well. And we can come back and tweak these. So I can maybe pull that one a little bit more to the left to get it to behave better. And maybe this one, I don't know, which way do I want it? Oops, come on. There, that looks lovely. So your first time through doesn't have to be perfect, because you can always go back with the direct selection tool, pick these directional handles, make them shorter, longer, and kind of twirl them left to right to get the resulting curve to behave. Let's use the pen tool and try another one. So it's literally just what we did, but notice I clicked. That was bad because now I'm just making square points. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to delete that. First thing you do is click and drag to set your first directional handle. Go to your next spot, click and drag to set your second directional handle. And I'm going to escape. So now that we did two that went up, how are we going to handle this one? So trial and error, just practice with it. Click and drag. There's my first directional handle going to the left. Sure enough, my rubber band follows out to the left, and then I come down to the orange and I click and drag. And hit escape to get out of the pen tool. So practice just doing single curves like this letter C in various directions first. And then we're going to draw a series of curves with the pen tool. And we're going to do that by going to Artboard 4. And you can see we have this little snake-like thing that we're going to make. So we're going to use their helpful tips with the red dots up here first. And again, with your pen tool, we're going to click and drag up to the red spot to set our first curve. So click and drag up to set your first curve. We're going to go to point 2. And we're going to click and drag down. They're showing us that it should be somewhere around the red dot, but normally that wouldn't be there. Also, understand that this one, we're pulling our directional handle down. That means that our next curve is automatically going to go in that direction and down. So we're going to have to do this like roller coaster-y kind of a shape right now. So from here, we're going to go to point 3, click and drag up. Then we're going to come to 4, click and drag down. 5, we're going to click and drag up. And 6, we'll click and drag down, and then we want to finish it. So either Command or Control click or hit Escape on your keyboard. So one thing that you'll realize when you're using this tool is that you spend a lot of time focusing on the segment behind your current anchor point. And if we go down here to the practice, I'll do it again. So click and drag up to set that first one. Click and drag down. Now from here, how this curve behaves is not only relative to this anchor point, it's also relative to the one I just made in the orange box. There's two anchor points that control that curve. So the angle that I'm putting on this anchor point number 2 right now, when I let go here, is going to have an effect on how this next curve behaves when I set it here at number 3. So you're always kind of paying attention to the one behind to get it and your current anchor point to behave together. So click and drag down, shift it a little to get it to bend to match the curve as best you can, and continue on until you get to the end point. And when you're done, Command click away. Now if any of these aren't perfect, like I said, you can go to your direct selection tool, and between here and here, this one just isn't quite as nice as I would like. So I wonder if I could fix it by tweaking this anchor point a little bit and then this one. A little bit better. All right, that is drawing a series of curves with the pen tool. And as you saw, whichever direction you drag out the point, we started by going up, so we got an up curve, but when we got to this point, we dragged down, and that gave us a down curve. We're now going to learn how we can change this so that we can make a bumpy kind of a caterpillar sort of thing, no down curves.